All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. In a moment, of course, you're going to hear from Mayor de Blasio, then Lori Pollack. We'll go over the May crime figures for you, and then we'll take your questions. First, I want to be clear about something special that's going on here in New York City. Even as crime throughout the nation has fallen by nearly half since the 1990s, our transformation has been a particular wonder to some, but certainly not to us. The way we do business here at the NYPD has evolved over the years. One of the reasons we've been able to sustain such low crime rates is because of the policing innovations pioneered by many of the people you see sitting up here today. When it comes to the crime rate and the historic lows we've achieved across so many categories, we've got a new baseline now, a new normal. Over the course of a month or a year, of course, that normal is going to fluctuate, and Chief Pollack will discuss that. As we sit here today, on Tuesday, June 5th, our murders are flat at 116 for the year, the same as this day last year. And our shooting incidents are down by 17, 276 versus 293, which is a 5.8% drop. And if you look at 2016, we're actually down by 82 shootings, and that's even more remarkable. But as we experience upticks from time to time, and we do, because nothing is ever guaranteed or promised to us, we know that we have the tools to reevaluate and address the root causes. So even in this low crime era, we're constantly reframing and carrying out new anti-crime plans and paying very close attention to the ever-changing conditions across the 5 boroughs, which I think is what you'll see the first half of May compared to the second half of the month. We saw something happening, and we redeployed many of our resources, particularly investigative resources, and you'll see what happened in the second half of the month. New York policing today is much more than just a traditional 911 call. It's about deeper problem solving. The evolution of policing means building that trust and strengthening relationships in all of our neighborhoods and leveraging that collaboration in a way that not only makes people we serve safer, but makes them feel safer too. And there's a distinction between those two. With the help of all the people who live, work, and play in New York City, we're able to pinpoint gang and crew members who tend to be our habitual violent criminals. I think a lot of our principles, including the all-important notion that public safety must be a shared responsibility, can be universally applied. And I think that how we'll continue to push down crime and violence here in New York City, that's how we do it. That's how other cities can do it too. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, I want to commend you and all the leadership of the NYPD who are here. Thank you all for the extraordinary work you're doing. I want a special thank you to the chair of the Public Safety Committee in the City Council, Donovan Richards, who is here with us, and thank you for having been here at a number of these sessions to support the work of the NYPD, and thank you for your leadership. A lot of what we're talking about today, again, was achieved because of neighborhood policing. Neighborhood policing could never have been achieved without the support of the City Council, taking actions that allowed us to get 2,000 more officers on patrol over the last few years. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Commissioner hit a really important point there. We are the safest big city in America for a reason. It is because the strategic approach continues to evolve. So literally within a month, you see changes being made. There were things happening in May that we didn't like. We made changes. We addressed them. We're going to keep addressing them. This is what a very dynamic leadership does. And I want to give the NYPD a lot of credit. They're constantly asking, what can we do next? What can we do better? The fact is, at the end of May this year compared to end of May last year, very similar dynamic in some areas, some real improvement in overall crime. But look, we clearly had one more murder by the end of this May than we had last year at the same time. That's one murder too many. And that's literally the way we think about it. We're all talking all the time about the numbers. Even one more murder than last year is not what we accept. We want to save that life. We're going to redouble our efforts. The overall picture, as you'll hear from Chief Pollack, shows continued progress. Year to date, total crime down 2.7% compared to last year. And that's on top of the amazing gains of the last few years. So that progress continues, and it is extraordinary because obviously it gets harder to continue to drive down crime with each passing month of success. There's never any sense in this team here of anything but commitment to going the next step and going farther and achieving even greater reductions. And I really admire them for that. No one has ever tried to say, we're there, we're done. No, we intend to go farther. So I want to commend everyone for some real impressive work this year. We intend to do some important things to keep it moving forward. June, as you heard, we've had some good success beginning June, and we're going to build upon that. A few words in Spanish. Mes tras mes, el Departamento de Policía sigue reduciendo el crimen a niveles récord en toda nuestra ciudad. En mayo, vimos un pequeño aumento en el número de homicidios, pero aún seguimos en camino hacia un récord bajo de crímenes. Somos la ciudad grande más segura del país. Gracias a los hombres y mujeres del NYPD, nuestra seguridad sigue mejorando cada día. With that, I want to turn to our Chief of Crime Control Strategies, Lori Pollock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. We have some good news for the month of May and some areas of concern from the beginning of the month that have leveled off. I am pleased to report that one trend we do see is the NYPD, when seeing upticks in crime categories, we make strategic deployment changes in our policing approach, and those changes did neutralize crime increases in the second half of May. This is true for homicide and shootings in May, and as you will see in the analysis, the May 2017 numbers we are comparing against were some of the best in the history of this city. So some key points. Overall crime for the year is down 2.7%, and in May, crime was at its lowest level since 1993. The only year that it has been lower was last year, with 8,161 crimes against 8,222 crimes recorded this May. Robbery is at another record-setting low for the month of May, with 1,166 reports versus last May's previous record low of 1,174 robberies. Burglary is also at a record low for the seventh month in a row now. For the first time in the Comstat era, May burglaries are below 900. We recorded 898 versus 981 last May. That is 83 fewer burglaries for an 8.5% reduction this May. We finished May with 114 murders, one more than the previous record low of 113. And at the end of May, shootings year to date are down by 5%, 268 versus 281, a 13 incident decrease from last year. These are amazing reductions attributed to the dedication and hard work of the men and women of the New York City Police Department. It is also a testament to the impact of our neighborhood policing philosophy, which has changed the way we operate as a police department. We did, however, see an uptick in murders and shootings in May. Last year, in May 2017, we recorded 26 murders, the second lowest number of murders since 1993. This May, we recorded 34, which is an increase of 8. The number of shootings in May this year increased 10 over last year, 77 versus 67. 67 was the lowest recorded May for shooting numbers. Coming off those low numbers, both murder and shooting incidents saw increases during the first 2 weeks of the month. It is critical to note that we are comparing against a historical month in May 2017. And you can see that despite these upticks, New York City remains an incredibly safe city, the safest big city in the world, and that NYPD has made enormous gains over the years. From May 1st through the 15th citywide, we recorded 21 murders versus 10, an increase of 11 murders or 110%. The largest number of murders and the biggest increase over the previous year was in Brooklyn, which recorded 13 or 65% of the city's murders May 1st through May 15th. This 13 was versus 2 murders in Brooklyn for the first 2 weeks of May last year, 2 being an extremely low number for 15 days in Brooklyn, again showing the monthly stats that we were going up against. The Bronx recorded 0 murders for the first 2 weeks of May in 2017. This year, the number for the first 2 weeks in the Bronx was 4. Again, as the mayor said, one murder is too many, but I think the bigger picture is that these are very low numbers that were attained in 2017, and we are continuing those low numbers in 2018. When you look at the second half of May, we saw a decrease in citywide murders, 14 versus 18, from May 15th through May 31st. These trends we saw for the entire month, the trends that we saw for the entire month of May were that 19 of the 34 murders occurred behind closed doors, which is a substantial 375% increase over the 4 incidents that occurred indoors last year in May. These types of crimes are definitely more challenging to prevent. Stabbing deaths increased 11 versus 4 last May, and firearms were used in 19 of the 34 murders in May, which is almost even with shooting deaths for the same month last year when there were 18 shooting deaths. Our shooting trends in May paint a similar picture, and as I said, the month of May we saw 77 shootings versus 67 during a record-setting May 2017. This May, 77 shootings is the second lowest May in CompStat history. The first 2 weeks of May, we saw an increase of 7 shootings. The first 2 weeks of May, we saw an increase of 7 shootings, 33 versus 26, up 27% over last year. Brooklyn and the Bronx experienced the biggest increase, 11 versus 7 for the Bronx and 19 versus 10 for Brooklyn. The second half of the month, we experienced 44 versus 41, an increase of only 3. Through the CompStat process and strategy meetings, borough commanders adjusted their deployment, and the second half of May, there was no increase in Brooklyn shootings, and the Bronx decreased shootings over the last year from 14 to 11. Our firearm arrests have risen steadily throughout the year. The month of May, we were even with last May with 312 gun arrests. As far as rapes go, reported rapes have increased 181 versus 121, an increase of 50%. The 181 rapes reported in May is the highest number in 16 years. 146 of those rapes were from last year, and 19.3 or 35 occurred in previous years. 18 of those 35 were from 2017, and 12 occurred more than 5 years ago. The relationship breakdown of rapes is 6% stranger, but the overwhelming majority, or 94%, the victim knows the offender. The trend continues in terms of reporting. More people are coming forward to report rapes that are happening this year and previous years. And we really are encouraging more people. And if anybody knows anyone who wants to report, I can give them the number right now. It's 212-267-7273. That's our Special Victims 24-hour hotline. Felony assaults, there were 1,886 felony assaults in May 2018, which is 54 more crimes than in May 2017, which was 1,832. Grand larceny was flat for the month, 3602 versus 3593. We saw decreases in identity theft and increases in unattended property being stolen and confidence games in person and over the phone. For auto theft, we were up 21 crimes, 455 versus 434. This is one category of auto theft. There is one category of auto theft that I would like to highlight, and I ask you, to get the word out that motorists should not leave their cars running or their keys in their car. This month alone, 79 motorists could have been saved. The aggravation and the sense of violation that comes when someone jumps into a running car and steals it. So, take any questions you have, or?
Do we have any crime-related questions? Yep.
I found it very hard to follow the presentation we just heard. There's lots of numbers being rounded off one after the other. I do not understand why at these news conferences you cannot give us a printed version of the crime stats that she is going to present. Could you please explain why that doesn't happen? And I also want to ask you to repeat the rape thing, because I could not figure out what you were talking about. But if you want to tell us why you don't give us it in print first, please.
Now, we can give you the numbers in print. That's not an issue. I thought the presentation was pretty easy to follow, especially about the violence. So,
if you could go over rapes here, because I couldn't
Sure.
understand the numbers.
So, in May, there was 181 reported rapes. That was an increase of over last year in May, when there was 121. That is the highest number in 16 years. 181 is the highest number in 16 years.
Further rape numbers you read off?
146 of those rapes were from this year. So people reported them, they were happening this year. Do you understand?
146 of the 181.
Right. 35 of the 181 occurred in previous years. 18 of those 35 were from 2017. And 12 occurred more than 5 years ago. That good?
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're trying not just to give you numbers, we're trying to give you some context with those numbers also.
I'll get better.
Is that my understanding?
Might not get it this afternoon, but we'll get your printed printed version. You can go on our website too, Comstat 2.0, and those numbers are posted daily. So you have access to those numbers all month long, all year long. Zolan, you have a question?
Just a quick follow-up on that. Highest in May in 16 years or highest of any?
Highest in May.
Any other crime questions? All right, other police topics? Zolan.
Anthony Bottom, as well as Eddie Matos, both convicted of killing police officers, are set to go before the parole board this month. Mayor, I know you made your comments very clear about Herman Bell previously. I'm wondering if you think that, if you have thoughts on these two and whether they should be released, and then a quick follow-up after that.
I have thoughts on both. Timothy Bottoms, that's the Piagentini and Jones case. My feelings are the same as with Herman Bell. Does not deserve to be paroled. That crime was an outright assassination. And with Matos, with Dwyer, I feel that he should serve his full time. If you kill a police officer, I think he should serve you a full sentence.
When it comes to, for the mayor, when it comes to anybody that has killed a member of law enforcement, do you think that that is a crime that is beyond redemption at that point, that somebody is not capable of correcting themselves when they go to prison and serve time for that crime?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to speak very broadly about my values. Any willful, conscious killing of a law enforcement officer, I think, should mean life in prison.
Police, Tony?
There's a report that there was a very large takedown in the Bronx by the federal authorities of a large-scale heroin fentanyl ring. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, Dermot will talk about that. Dermot?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure, Tony, to talk about the great work of the members of Bronx Narcotics this morning and for the past 11 months. Together with our partners, the FBI, we took down a case, 11-month investigation that culminated this morning with the arrest of 17 suspects. This is a violent criminal organization that really was pushing poison onto the streets of New York City and the suburbs. This organization, you see some of the pictures up here behind me, were responsible for, just during the course of the investigation, 5 deaths from fentanyl poisoning, additional overdoses where people were thankfully saved. And that's just, Tony, in New York City. There were additional overdoses in Westchester County. To give you an idea of the scope of the investigation, just this morning, as search warrants were simultaneously being executed, we recovered approximately 3 kilos of heroin. And again, that's the heroin in this case has been containing fentanyl. We recovered about 2 pounds of marijuana, approximately. We recovered a loaded .45 caliber firearm and a significant amount of cash. So, culmination of a lot of great work by the men and women of Bronx Narcotics. I want to tip my hat to them, and the streets of the Bronx are a little bit safer today.
Is there any amount of heroin estimated over the duration of the ring's activity?
Yeah, I don't want to give you bad numbers. I can follow up with you, but we had if you see that picture there, it's a little hard to see. The middle of that table, that's 2 bricks of heroin wrapped in gray cellophane. That's another kilo in that cellophane bag. So that's 3 kilos right there. And then that's hundreds of decks of heroin, each one readily capable of, unfortunately, as we've seen, causing somebody's demise. So I really can't say enough to the great work Safe Streets Task Force, members of the Bronx Narcotics, together with the Southern District, who's going to be prosecuting this organization.
Okay.
On that investigation, what kind of charges are these guys facing on it? Have any of them been charged with, or could they be charged with homicide or manslaughter in connection with the overdose?
At this point, that is not in the plans. But I could tell you that the charges on this group, I don't want to misquote the federal statute, but it's essentially conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and they are facing lengthy sentences. And that's a combination of the current acts combined with their violent history.
Commissioner, I wanted to ask about the increase in rapes. We've seen that a number of times previously, and normally the explanation is that it has to do with reporting, including a significant number from prior years, but a significant portion of these are from this year. So I'm wondering if there's any change in the explanation for the increase.
No, we've, as you know, we've embarked on a program to increase reporting. It's your call. I think you've probably seen the advertisements around the city. We've done a lot of work with the advocacy groups to make sure that we do, that people, that survivors of sexual assault feel comfortable in coming to the police and report these crimes. So that increase is a result of more reporting, obviously, and we've put additional resources into the Special Victims Unit. We talked about putting 20 additional investigators and 14 people in cold case. And Chief Shea is in the process of finishing up his review of the Special Victims Unit to see if other personnel are needed in that unit. Yes.
I guess just to follow up on that, have you all ruled out the possibility that there are in fact more rapes occurring than there had been in the past?
I don't understand that question.
So you're saying, I guess to phrase it another way, do you believe there are roughly the same amount of rapes occurring in the city?
We are asking.
People are reporting them, or are there in fact more rapes?
We think it's as a result of our outreach that more people are coming forward, that survivors of sexual assault are coming forward to the police and reporting these crimes. Yes, sir.
Anything you can say about the circumstances of Kate Spade's death, as far as what might have been left in that note?
Yeah, this just happened a couple hours ago. Dermot, do you have any update?
Yep. So at about 10 hours this morning, in the confines of the 19th precinct, members of the 19th precinct responded to an address on Park Avenue. It appears at this point in time to be a tragic case of apparent suicide, but it is early in the investigation. There was a suicide note left at the scene. I'm not going to get into the contents of that note, but that appears to be the sum total of what it is at this point. But we still have detectives on the scene. It's still a fairly fresh incident.
Was anyone else present at the home defense?
She was discovered by the housekeeper.
John?
There was a shooting earlier this morning in Queens in which a man was shot, apparently for his car, a BMW. Do you have any information on that?
Yep. So what we have in that shooting in the 105 precinct is a gentleman comes home from work, parks his car. He winds up being shot in the cheek. He is expected to survive. All indications at this point, it is preliminary. We're probably about 10 hours into it, indicate a robbery, an attempted robbery. But that's really what we have. Obviously, in a case like this, the investigators are fanning out now and doing the normal investigative steps that we would in any incident of this nature. And we'll also try to link it up to other incidents that happen in the adjoining area. But at this point, preliminary, it's an apparent robbery.
Did he take anything? And is there a connection to other crimes in the area?
That's what's being looked at right now in terms of, for example, there was a robbery in the adjoining precinct today. But all these things take time to sort out. But at this point, robbery appears to be the motive, and we'll move from there.
Tony?
Circling back to Kate Spade, is there any sense of that perhaps her domestic situation, marital situation, may have sparked what happened? And was her husband called to the scene, or did he arrive when the officers responded?
Yeah, I'm gonna stand by the original statement, Tony. At this point, there was a note left. The contents of that note, as well as the physical state of the apartment and the comments of the witness, lend to the credibility that it is an apparent suicide. But we'll go from here and continue to look into the incident. But in terms of contents of the note or communication with members of the family, I'm not going to get into that.
Just to follow up as well, can you talk about where inside the apartment she was found by the housekeeper, and then also any of her movements before, earlier this morning? Did she leave the apartment for any reason?
Yeah, same answer. I'll stand by the earlier comments.
Any other police-related questions?
There was an naloxone recall the past few days, and I was wondering if that affected any of the city or the police department's batches.
Chief Monahan has that.
No, that was Hospira. It's an injectable naloxone that's issued to some hospitals, but that's not what we utilize. It's not what the EMS utilizes, so it doesn't have any effect to us.
Any updates to the K2 arrests?
You got it? Yeah.
All right, the update. All right, since the incident, since May 19th, there's been 307 overdose cases, no deaths at this point, nothing that is attributed to K2, and we're up to 90 arrests for sale at this point, sale and possession.
Think about a possible stranger rape in the Bronx today, anything on that?
Yeah, after midnight this morning, confines right on the 5052 border on Reservoir Place there. We have a woman reports to us of a forcible rape very early. Special Victims has that case, and they'll go forward from there in terms of, again, physical collection of the evidence, working with the advocates, trying to fan out, collect video, and see. But at this point, we don't have it matching up to any other incidents in that area. I can get back to you with that.
That's all, folks.
Okay, other topics. Other topics.
See you later.
All right, let's get these guys. Hold on one second.
We're gonna reset quick here, so if you're gonna leave, we'll do it quick.
The closing of the door will signify our commencement. They're struggling with the door. There's a very complex door closing going on here. And the door is not closed. Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, it's been, I think, 3 years since you proposed a cap on the number of for-hire vehicles in the city.
Yep.
On the basis of congestion, traffic congestion. It's been 3 years, more cars are on the streets.
Yep.
More apparent congestion. 5 suicides apparently due to the economic stress on these people, although I'd like to hear how you view that.
Yep.
And my question, aside from that, your view of these deaths and how they occurred, why they occurred, is whether the administration is going to renew an effort to put caps on for-hire vehicles, and if so, how?
Okay, thanks for the question. First of all, it's a tragedy that these drivers have taken their own life. It's horrible, and my heart goes out to their families, and it's something we want to do everything we can to prevent. I've said very publicly there's a crisis happening for these individuals, but that's not the whole story, and we have to be straightforward about that. There are many people in this city facing economic duress. When someone turns to taking their own life, there are obviously other factors at play and things that have to be addressed. And that's why I say, and I urge everyone to include it in your reporting, anyone who has suicidal thoughts, whether it is because of economic duress or any other problem, should reach out for help. Now there's one place you can do it, 888-NYC-WELL, and you can get real and immediate help. So I just don't want it minimized to the for-hire vehicle policy issue as the only thing going on here. I think there's also a human reality that the pain these individuals were in needed to be addressed. And I would ask anyone, if they see someone in their life who's going through that, help them get to a professional. On the policy front, You're right. Several years ago, we put a lot of energy into trying to get that cap. And it was a major policy initiative, and a lot of political capital went into it, and I was very disappointed in the outcome. Since then, the underlying argument has been proven more strongly that the proliferation of certain types of for-hire vehicles is actually causing a lot more congestion. And what's happened is really to some extent because of the design, the business model of companies like Uber, they're constantly trying to increase the number of drivers even when there isn't an increase in business to go with it. So we have more and more drivers driving around without a customer. And a lot of those drivers are not doing so well economically on top of that. But it's really adding to the congestion problem, as are many other factors. I do think it's time to revisit the topic of the caps. I think the best way to do that is for the City Council to determine what it is ready to act on. I know the council is looking at this very seriously. I think after the budget, we'll all start engaging on this much more intensively. But I believe we need to act. I want to find a type of action that the council is ready to take.
Could the TLC act unilaterally to limit the number of licenses, for example?
It's a mixed situation of what regulation can be achieved by the TLC and what has to be done by the City Council through law. I'm not going to pretend to give you the exact nuance, but we can certainly follow up and get you that. TLC has taken actions to create more parity, for example, on disability access, which a lot of restrictions were put on, or mandates, I should say, were put on the yellow cabs, but not on other elements of the industry. That has been addressed. There are other measures the TLC will look to take for additional parity and fairness, including, as I said, the fact that a lot of these drivers are not doing so well and their rights are not being recognized economically. I'm saying for the folks in for example, the Ubers. That which can be acted on by the TLC, we're committed to doing that, but I feel strongly there's an element of this that can only be acted on by City Council legislation. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, the governor was asked today about your school's proposal that you announced this weekend. He seemed to tie it to mayoral control. I wonder if you could just respond to him tying something that could potentially change the future of students for years to come to what every year becomes a political fight, like mayoral control.
Right. Your question is accurate in every way. It does become a political fight, and it shouldn't be a political fight. Mayoral control should be about that debate should be about what's going to help our kids the most. It should not be politicized, nor should, of course, the question of how we create equal access to high-quality education. I think they're two separate matters. I think you see already in the Assembly and in the State Senate a lot of support for the notion of changing the admissions process for the specialized high schools. It's obviously its own issue. Mayoral control is going to be debated as well. I think people could have different views on each. But I feel strongly that there's already a lot of support for our proposal to change admissions for the specialized schools. Very much appreciate the support of the State Education Commissioner, very much appreciate the support of the State Education Chancellor. Many voices have been raised already in support of the proposal. I think the legislature will understand it's something that needs to be acted on, if not in this session, which is seeming to end in a strange manner, in the next one. But I do think there are two issues with their own merits.
With him kind of passing doubt over the fact that it will get done this year, does that make you less hopeful that it will happen?
No, I'm always hopeful because I don't think the process in Albany is about one person. I think it is about the legislature first and foremost. And I believe the legislature already, certainly the Assembly, and I've spoken to Speaker Hastie about this, the Assembly believes this is a matter of fairness and justice. And I think the Senate is going to change, and that the majority will certainly see that as well. So, no, it's never about one person. I think if we're able to, on the basis of fairness, put together real momentum in the legislature, that's the most essential piece of this equation. Yes?
Mayor, in regards to the legal bills in conjunction with investigations into campaign-related conduct, which your office has said is about $300,000, do you have any, is there a plan in place with Kramer Levin in terms of how you'll pay that back, or are they charging you interest, or is it just being held until you determine what can happen with a legal defense fund?
I have to pay it back, and I will pay it back. I don't know their specific terms and conditions about timelines. We've all been very clear with each other. It has to be paid back, but everyone's also clear that we need a methodology to achieve that. And that's something the city council has to act on.
Do you think that a law firm would extend this, loan essentially, or allow it to sit unpaid to somebody else who wasn't looking to set up a legal defense fund or wasn't?
I think there's been legal defense funds for generations, and it's understood that many people don't have the resources readily available to pay these kind of bills right away, and they have to put it together and pay it over time. I don't think that's anything unusual. Yes.
Same topic. What's the process for the council devising this legislation? Are you kind of talking to them about things you'd like to see in the legislation? Did you request that they do this, or how is that working as far as the coordination?
The council's aware of the issue. I think I can't speak for them. Obviously, you have to ask them about their own views, but I think they're aware this is an issue that clearly we don't have a law that addresses it properly currently, and so we need legislative action. In terms of their specific intent, I can't speak for them, but I think we've had a dialogue about the fact that there's a gray area here that has to be addressed, and they understand that, but it's up to them how and when they'll do that. Yes?
So Bill Clinton recently said that he doesn't owe Monica Lewinsky an apology. He's since tried to sort of clarify those comments and saying that he already apologized to her and her family before a panel of ministers in the White House. I'm wondering if you think he should offer a more aggressive apology to her in light of the Me Too era or just present circumstances.
What he did was wrong, and she was wronged. She was a young woman wronged by the President of the United States. So I don't know what he said previously. I can't comment on that. It was wrong, and if there's anything further he has to say to make clear that what he did was wrong, he should do it. Again, I've said what I'm going to say. Questions? Yes. Yes, right there.
I have two questions about the specialized high school initiative. There are some protests from communities arguing that the kids were able to get into those schools not because they're rich, but because they studied hard for it. Because many of them are also from low-income and immigrant families. So I was wondering if there are ways to not having this zero-sum game in community to help the Black and Hispanic students to prepare better for the test, or having more elite high schools. That's my first question. And
Let me answer that, and I'll come back for your second. We certainly put some real energy in the last few years in terms of trying to increase the amount of test prep that was available to students of all backgrounds to see if that would change the dynamic. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing that result, which gets back to the point that it's a single standardized test, which really shouldn't be the admissions dynamic anyway. It shouldn't be the reason that you get admitted to a school. So I want to separate the two questions. If I believed a single test made sense to determine one's destiny, we could then talk about the best ways to approach fairness around that single standardized test. I don't think it makes sense to begin with. And I can say our efforts to see if we could get any better outcome with the current reality didn't really bear any fruit. So I think you're right to say this should not be seen as a zero-sum game. We need to ensure the maximum number of high-quality high school seats in this city. I've asked the chancellor to come forward with a plan to do that. That could involve adding additional seats to the specialized schools. It could also involve building out some of the other high-quality high schools we have. So we'll pursue that. But the central thrust here is we cannot have our finest high schools that are the breeding ground for our future leaders be exclusionary, which is what they are right now. Just the facts are the facts. And I use Stuyvesant as the example because it's just unbelievable to me. It's 1% black, 3% Latino in a city that's over 50% black and Latino. It's just not acceptable. I want to see kids get to good options for them. That's what Equity and Excellence is all about. I want to see kids of all backgrounds do great. Our job is to keep providing them with a lot of good options. Go ahead.
public hearings before they vote on the legislation?
I can't speak for the Assembly or the Senate. My understanding is that they consistently do have public hearings on these type of matters, and I certainly think it's a healthy process. Vis-a-vis the Discovery Program, this has been around for decades. There's no reason for additional steps. We're going to go ahead and implement it, and I think it's the right thing to do to move it as quickly as possible. Yes?
On the specialized high schools as well, I'm wondering, politically speaking, governmentally speaking, why you decided to make this push now to change the state law as far as introducing legislation very close to the end of the session.
Yep.
In the beginning of your second term, why not do it sooner in the session or even sooner in your tenure as mayor?
I spoke to this both on Sunday and Monday, but I'm happy to go over it again. The summary point is the stars have aligned, and that's not a figure of speech in this case. That's trying to explain the reality. The combination of this administration embarking on a new term with a new chancellor, the movement for greater diversity having gained real strength, the fact that other efforts clearly weren't bearing fruit, and the fact that we determined in the case of the Discovery Program that there was another pathway we could take that would achieve more extensive results more quickly. All of these pieces came together. The other fact, because you say government and politics, the other fact we had to really weigh into the equation was everything else we were fighting for previously and how it juxtapositioned with this. This was in my platform, so clearly it was something I wanted to do from the beginning. First fight, of course, was for pre-K in 2014. We had mayoral control fights. We've had a lot of fights to protect school funding and our ability to spend money without undue interference from Albany. There's been a lot of moving parts. But I really think what happened here was a combination of us figuring out some things we could do differently and the right moment. And then, look, this legislative session, as I mentioned, has gotten very curious very quickly. We don't know what's going to happen here. You never know. Sometimes a door opens and you can get something through. But there was also a clear sense that it would be virtuous to start this bigger discussion, even if it was preparatory to an action next year, because it deserves a lot of debate. I'm very encouraged by the response so far, even though I certainly know there's criticism out there. But I think the pieces came together. It was the right time to act from our point of view.
Got time for two more, folks.
See if there's anything else. Looking to the left, looking to the right. Go ahead.
Follow up, and forgive me if you've answered this as well, but you said, I believe a couple months ago, that you would consult the law department or your lawyers about the possibility of changing the process for the 5 high schools that aren't specifically named. Just for my edification, have you learned anything new from that consultation, and if so, what?
This also has been answered, but if you don't know the answer, I'm going to share it with you. So yes, we did pursue that conversation. And the sum total of it was, it's a gray situation, and when confronted with a gray situation, it's better to change the underlying law. So that's what we really felt. And also the response that we were getting as we started to talk to people about different ways of addressing it was positive, starting with the Assembly. This was, there's been a process over months now of examining different options and having different conversations with people. And what we found was there was a real interest in the Assembly in taking this up and a belief that we were heading in the right direction with this kind of new model. We've also heard some really good response from members of the Senate. So I think we're in striking range of getting the law change, which is by far the preferable way to address the issue. Please.
Mayor, you unveiled a property tax commission with the council speaker last week. Do you think that the current property tax system is racially or economically discriminatory towards certain people in New York City?
I think it's geographically inconsistent. It's clear that the way the valuations are done and then how that juxtaposes with the property tax system creates an inconsistency between different neighborhoods. I've said that many times at many town hall meetings. That's one of the central things we want to address. So the commission's in place. They're going to get to work right away. And as soon as we have specific proposals we can act on, we're going to act with the city council. Obviously, all the members were chosen with the city council. There's a high level of unity on this question. And then some actions will require the legislature. But there's a clear lack of transparency and inconsistency across neighborhood that we have to address. Okay, thanks everyone.